I remember the way the sunlight poured through the grimy kitchen window that morning, illuminating the dust motes dancing lazily across the room. The faint sound of my sister's laughter wafted down the hallway like a mocking whisper, an echo from the world I was never truly a part of. I sat at the small, worn-out table, a chipped mug of lukewarm coffee cradled in my hands, feeling as though the faded floral wallpaper was closing in on me. The warmth of the sun couldn't penetrate the chill in my bones, nor could it thaw the ice that had formed around my heart. Are you even listening? My mother's voice pulled me back to the present, a sharp reminder of the bitter truth that had become my life. I blinked, forcing myself to focus on her, seated across from me with her arms crossed, lips pursed into a tight line of disappointment. Yes, Mom, I am, I lied, lowering my gaze. I could never stand to look directly at her when she was upset. It felt like standing too close to an open flame, one that could easily scorch me into submission. Good, because I need you to help your sisters today. It's a big day for all of us. The way she said big day sent a shiver down my spine. I had learned over the years that big often meant expensive, excessive, and entirely focused on my sisters. Of course, I murmured, though the heaviness in my chest only grew. Today was yet another day that I would be called upon to be the dutiful daughter, the one who seamlessly blended into the background of their lives while they basked in the glory of my parents' love. What do you need me to do? My mother's eyes brightened, and for a brief moment I could see the radiance that had once captivated my father before life had robbed her of it, before they had decided that two golden children were a more than enough blessing. You know, the dress Charlotte picked for her engagement party. I need you to go pick it up from the tailor, make sure it fits perfectly. My heart sank deeper. Charlotte's engagement, another milestone that would pull me further into the shadow of their happiness. Yes, Mom, I replied with a resigned nod, pushing back the bitterness that threatened to spill over like a boiling pot. And Madison will be busy with the decorations. I want everything to be perfect, Aurora, no mistakes, understand. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if daring me to raise any objections. Of course, I said, hiding the hurt that throbbed in my chest like a festering wound. How long could I keep convincing myself that I was less than my sisters, that my existence was for their convenience? Charlotte's laughter echoed once more like chimes in the wind, drifting from the other room. It filled the space with an energy I could hardly bear. Just the thought of them dressed to the nines, all smiles and confidence, while I scurried around to ensure their day was flawless, like a ghost hovering perpetually unseen. I rose from the table, feeling the weight of the family dynamic settle around me, the unspoken agreement that I existed for their benefit. As I walked outside, the chill of the autumn air hit my face, the sharpness somehow invigorating amidst the fog of my thoughts. I could see the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees lining our driveway, casting shifting shadows along the ground. I always admired how beauty could exist alongside decay, how light could flicker even in the depths of darkness. And yet that never seemed to glow for me. The tailor's shop was a short walk away, and I paid little attention to the familiar sights that had blurred together over years of walking this path. A cacophony of emotions brewed inside me as I pushed open the door to the little shop. The bell above jingled softly, and as I stepped in, the warm, inviting scent of fabric and leather swirled around me. Good morning, dear. The tailor's voice welcomed me, a cheerful old man whose eagerness always felt genuine. He had been working with my family for as long as I could remember, and there was a part of me that cherished the warmth in his smile, even while knowing I did not shine in his eyes like my sisters did. Morning, I replied, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. I'm here to pick up a dress for Charlotte. Ah, yes, the beautiful red one, he said, moving eagerly to the back of the store. I could hear his footsteps echoing against the wooden floor, and I took a moment to collect my thoughts. I stood there looking around at all the shimmering fabrics and intricate patterns that seemed to weave magic into every garment. I wondered what it would be like to have something made just for me, yet that thought was quickly replaced by a familiar sting of envy. I glanced at the corner mirror, and for a fleeting moment I saw my sisters reflected in the glass, a time long past where we had hairbrushes in hand and laughter spilling from our lips. But those moments were meant only for them. I did not belong in those memories. Here it is. The tailor's cheerful voice broke through my reverie as he wheeled out the dress on a hanger, fabric cascading around like flames. It's a stunning piece, if I may say so. I reached out, forcing myself to admire the craftsmanship. It really was beautiful, yet the fire that flickered within the fabric felt distant and out of reach, a stark reminder that it would never hold as much importance for me as it would for her. It's perfect, I said, fighting against the emotions swelling inside me. Thank you. Just be sure to give my regards to Charlotte, he added, a twinkle in his eyes. She always wears my clothes so beautifully. Of course, I replied, barely masking the bitterness that had started to creep into my voice. As I walked back home, the dress bag heavy against my shoulder, I felt as though I was dragging a weight behind me, one that was much harder to carry than mere fabric. All around me, the world felt unbearably bright and alive, and in stark contrast, I seemed invisible. When I stepped inside my house, the gentle warmth greeted me, and so did the noise, the vibrant chatter from the living room. Did you get it? Charlotte's voice floated down the hall, filled with the kind of enthusiasm I used to crave. I didn't need to see her face to know she wore that practiced, perfect smile. Yes, I replied, keeping my voice steady and calm. I approached the living room, a sense of trepidation tightening my chest as I revealed the dress, handing it over as if it were a peace offering. Oh, Aurora, this is incredible, Charlotte exclaimed, her eyes lighting up as she examined the fabric. I cannot wait to wear this. My heart sank at the brightness in her voice. It was a melody I could never join. You will look stunning, I said quietly, backing away slightly, eager to disappear again into the ether. Can you help me try it on? She asked, looking up with an eagerness I had come to fear. We need to make sure it fits perfectly. Sure, I replied, though I felt like my insides were churning. There was something inherently bittersweet about witnessing their joy, knowing it didn't include me unless it was to bolster their happiness. Charlotte rushed off to change while I stood there in the living room, the walls adorned with family photos that told a story, one of joy, achievement, and love, none of which I appeared to be a part of. Madison entered then, her phone clutched in one hand, scrolling with an intensity I could hardly fathom. What do you think of the decorations? She asked, barely looking up. I need them to be perfect for tonight. You don't want to ruin the theme, right? Of course not, I answered dully, feeling even more invisible beside her. Good, you know how much this day means to Charlotte. Madison's voice was laced with that familiar tone, the one that insinuated responsibility was all mine. Just focus and help out. And there it was, my role defined yet again. The silent assistant, the ghost who could never escape her shadow. Ready, Charlotte's voice rang out, her excitement cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. She stepped out in the dress, its colors vibrant against her skin, the fit accentuating everything my mother cherished. In that moment, she looked radiant, and the family admiration cascaded around her like glitter. Oh wow, Madison exclaimed, finally tearing her gaze from her phone. You look amazing, just amazing, doesn't she? My mother joined us, pride beaming from her eyes as Charlotte twirled with glee, the fabric flowing like a river behind her. I felt like a spectator in my own life, standing on the sidelines as they celebrated, their laughter ringing through the air, a melody filled with the sort of warmth that felt warm for everyone except me. The echo of key moments haunted my mind. I remembered my sister taking the bond, my parents dismissing me like I was an afterthought, a mere inconvenience turned invisible. When I retired to my room later that evening, the weight of my life settled upon my shoulders. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the loneliness wrap around me. It took root deep within like a slow poison feeding on my hope. That day was meant to be joyful for me too, but I felt like a fading shadow. And as I considered the future, a future painted in the same shades of neglect, I knew something had to change. I was tired of being the forgotten one, of standing beneath the heavy weight of familiarity and sibling envy. I wanted more than to be a bystander. That's when my decision crystallized into clarity. I would burn the ties that held me down, that suffocated me under the guise of family. The shadows that had wrapped around my heart for years would no longer bind me. I was done playing the role of the silent daughter. I was going to take back what was mine, and with it, I would set myself free. The thought surged through me like electricity, igniting a fire in my belly that had long been snuffed out. I would sever the lifeline connecting me to the people who had built their happiness on my heartache. I was ready to break the cycle of neglect, and there would be no more shadows for me to dwell in. I was no longer invisible. I was finally awake. The phone call from my aunt felt like a thunderclap in the middle of a serene day. I was in my small but cozy apartment, the walls adorned with medical charts and potted plants that thrived under my careful attention. As a 25-year-old resident doctor, I had dedicated countless hours to patient care, often losing myself in the chaotic world of medicine to drown out the lingering echoes of my past. But that evening, as the news unfurled, I felt a shift in the wind, a strange anticipation rising up within me. My heart raced, not with sympathy but with twisted excitement as the truth unraveled like a badly written script. Aurora, my aunt's voice trembled on the other end, the line crackling as if the universe itself struggled to share this burden. It's about your parents, they need you. What do you mean? I pressed, feeling a tight knot form in my stomach. What happened? They are homeless, your sisters, Charlotte and Madison kicked them out. It's a mess, dear. They've manipulated everything, swindled your parents right out of their home, you have to understand. I leaned against my kitchen counter, the cold surface grounding me as my mind raced. My sisters had always played the role of perfect daughters, cloaked in innocence while pulling strings behind the scenes, but to turn on our parents so viciously, the thought brought an unexpected thrill to my veins. Why should I care? I interrupted, my voice sharper than I intended, cutting through the distress. Let them deal with it like I did. Aurora, my aunt's voice softened, carrying a weight of exasperation, you're their only hope. Their hope, I spat, bitterness tinged with a twisted satisfaction. Hope was never offered to me, they made their choices. Aurora, please, she pleaded, urgency blending with desperation. They need a place to stay, and you're the only one who has space. A familiar rush of anger swept through me, my pulse quickening as I contemplated the delicious irony of the situation. My parents, the very people who had discarded me without a second thought, were now seeking refuge in the very home I had fought to build for myself. The laughter and celebration that had accompanied my departure still echoed in my mind, taunting me as though their victory had been solidified in stone. I could picture their faces, filled with delight and smug satisfaction as I walked away from everything they had robbed me of. No, I responded coolly, an ember of defiance igniting in my chest. I'm not their safety net, let them suffer the consequences of their actions. You may regret this, my aunt said, her words ringing like a warning bell. Regret? I scoffed, disbelief bubbling up from somewhere deep within. Regret is what I felt for years under their roof, not now. They thought I would always be there to pick up the pieces. That's not who I am anymore. Aurora, don't turn your back on family, she said softly. I let out a long, controlled breath, clenching my fists against the counter as a wave of recent memories flashed through my mind. The desperate dinners where I was met with judging eyes, constant comparisons to my glamorous sisters, and that one time in high school when I brought home straight A's only to be told, "Why can't you be more like Charlotte?" I'm not turning my back. I'm standing up, I said, though I knew my aunt had hung up. I let the silence resonate in my ears, the faintest hint of a grin curling my lips as the reality of my position hit me. They were the ones who had written this heartbreaking script, and now I had the chance to flip the pages back on them. The weeks that followed blurred together like an artistic watercolor, me drifting along on a current of dispassionate resolve. I immersed myself in work, throwing myself deeper into the rigors of being a resident doctor. The fluorescent lights of the hospital were my new reality, the late nights filled with chaos oddly soothing. Each time I entered the hospital, I left my feelings at the door, focusing entirely on the world of patients needing care. Yet in the back of my mind, the idea of my parents' misfortune played like a cruel melody, sharp notes cutting through my professionalism. I had erased them from my heart, yet they took up more space in my mind with every passing day. It was captivating to consider the irony. Their precious daughters, the ones they had favored, had turned against them. My so-called family had crumbled, the very relationships they had placed above mine, now a burden they had to bear. Then the day came when they knocked on my door, frail and beaten, their once familiar faces now lined with confusion and weariness. I stood there for a moment, the weight of their presence pressing on the threshold of my heart. They wore nothing but the remnants of their wealthy life and the lingering remnants of entitlement. My mother clutched a faded tote bag while my father's hands trembled slightly as he fidgeted with his wedding band. "Aurora, please," my mother began, her voice a broken whisper. "Aurora," my father interjected, the authority in his tone faltering, we need help." Their neediness resonated through the hallway, a tune I never thought I would hear from them. The temptation to smile was overwhelming, but I steeled my face, letting the door crack open enough to let them see me but not into my soul. "Help," I echoed lightly, savoring the taste of each word. "You need help, but where were you when I needed assistance, when I needed support?" I leaned against the doorframe, almost relaxing into my role as judge and jury. "How could I forget the many times you chose my sisters over me? This seems rich." They exchanged glances filled with shame, my mother's eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Aurora, you have to understand, it was never personal," she choked out, her fingers brushing against the door as if grasping onto something solid. "Never personal," I countered, my voice rising as my heart thundered in my chest. "You always said I was the black sheep, that I didn't belong." "We were wrong," my father exclaimed, desperation rushing in as they stepped forward, invading the space I had fiercely built for myself. "Step any closer," I warned, holding my ground. "If you entered my home, then you must recognize my boundaries." Sarcasm colored my words like a brush dipped in darkness. I watched their faces twist in realization and regret, but I reveled in their humiliation. The cycle was broken, and finally the power rested with me. I crossed my arms, a guardian of my own sanctuary, allowing their helplessness to wash over me, drowning out any flicker of empathy that had tried to spark inside. "Ease," my mother pleaded, her voice cracking. "We have nowhere else to go. What do you want from us?" "What I want," I said slowly, letting each syllable fall like stones into still water, "is for you to acknowledge my pain, to understand the years of rejection I suffered. You will be in my house, and I will not pretend that you deserve the comfort I have built." Their hands fell limp at their sides, bereft of the bravado that had fueled their lives for so long. Perhaps even their pride was stripped bare. "What happens if," my father began but trailed off, unable to finish his thought. I watched him struggle, the anger I carried morphing into something akin to satisfaction. It felt strangely liberating to witness them crumble, unshielded and vulnerable at my door. "If what?" I pressed, daring him to speak. If you cannot welcome us back." His eyes searched mine, and for a fleeting second the old maternal instinct clawed back to the surface, a confusing flicker of love buried under years of heartache. "Then find somewhere else," I finished, tastefully reclaiming my composure as I turned the key to lock them outside. "I am not your savior, I do not owe you anything." I stepped back from the door, those mocking cheers from my parents as I left echoing loudly in my ears. I watched as their shadows shrank beneath the weight of my indifference. The image left a bruise on my soul, but I felt lighter, unencumbered by false affection. Each step they took away from my door became a step closer to my final triumph. The climax was building, and soon enough I would unleash the story of my revenge, a tale that would reshape my heart from one marked by pain into one guided by retribution. I would bear the weight of their suffering, and it would be gloriously sweet. I could already hear the sweet, chaotic symphony of voices crumbling beneath the weight of their consequences. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting shadows that curled and twisted along my living room walls, bringing with it a creeping chill that contrasted the heat of the anger brewing inside me. I had just settled onto my worn-out couch, cradling a warm cup of herbal tea that sent spicy notes of ginger and chamomile swirling in my senses, when the doorbell sliced through the stillness like a knife. My heart began to race, the suddenness of it echoing in my ears. I exchanged my tea for tension, the liquid abandoning my grip as I shot upright, instincts prickling like static electricity underneath my skin. Standing there in the dusky twilight was the one figure I had tried so hard to forget, my mother. She looked frail and lost, a stark contrast to the way I had always remembered her, confident, dismissive, wrapped in a snakeskin of authority that tore me down methodically throughout my childhood. Now her skin was translucent, her eyes sunken into pools of desperation, and for a fleeting moment a flicker of pity warmed the icy edges of my anger. Her breath appeared in shuddering gasps, sending little puffs of vapor into the crisp evening air. Aurora, she whispered my name as if it were a prayer, voice cracking like ancient plaster. Please let me in. I hesitated just a breath too long, my fingers clenching around the doorframe as memories clawed at the edges of my mind. I remembered the countless nights I had spent crying into pillows, feeling invisible beside my sisters who were always given a revered pedestal. The echoes of their laughter haunted me, but not the laughter of joy. No, it was the laughter of betrayal, a reminder that I was never enough. Why should I? The words slipped out before I could collect them, dripping with cautious skepticism. You had no regard for me before. Her shoulders slumped at the weight of my words. I know I hurt you. I was wrong, Aurora, so wrong, but I am begging you. Her voice trailed off, choked by a sob that seemed to claw at her throat. I could see it then, the desperate glimmer in her eyes that begged for forgiveness, not just from me but also from herself. How ironic that she had come to me, the one person she had dismissed so easily for so long. This was a new experience for her. I had always been the one begging for scraps of dignity from her table, and now she stood on the other side of the door, a broken woman pleading for my help. What do you want? I demanded, using every ounce of bravado I could muster to shield myself from the turmoil of mixed emotions inside. You've never needed me before. Why now? Silence stretched between us like a taut rope, the air heavy with the unspoken words that hovered in the darkness. Her lips quivered as she struggled to find her voice amidst the weight of my accusation. It's your sisters? My sisters, really? I scoffed, crossing my arms as I glared at her. You mean the same sisters who always took priority over me? The same sisters who you always defended when they tore me down? Yes, but she stammered, her pallor deepening beneath my words. They need you, they are struggling, and she inhaled sharply, her eyes shifting to the ground. We are in trouble. Trouble, I repeated, feeling a wave of something cold wash over me. What kind of trouble? The house, it's going to be taken away. They are struggling financially, your father and I. We thought we could manage it on our own, but she inhaled shakily. The pressure is too much. We need your help to save our home. Such ironies tangled together, drawing out a bitter laughter that bubbled up before I could stifle it. And you came to me for help after everything, after all those years of pushing me aside. Why should I care about the house you filled with memories of pain? Her tear-filled eyes met mine, and for a moment the pent-up resentment twisted, dragging me back to times of need and longing. I remembered waiting on cold, hard floors, straining to hear footsteps that never came. Please, she reiterated, voice cracking again. We had an agreement with the bank, we thought we'd be all right. There were debt collectors and your sisters. They always relied on you for everything. That's rich, I mocked, my voice hardening like steel. You didn't think I could handle anything important back then. I was the one who could not be counted on. The silence that followed was a charged moment rife with tension, the air thick with unresolved emotions that festered between us. The weight of her guilt hung in the atmosphere, clinging like a fog that refused to clear. I know, she said softly, a tremor in her voice as she swallowed hard. I was wrong about you. I was wrong to think I could manage without you. But we can't lose that house. We just can't. It was impossible to ignore the knot tightening in my chest. I was torn between the suffocating layers of bitterness that had protected me and the deep-seated desire to be seen, to feel valued for the first time. Even now, the scars of my childhood had woven me into something resilient but painfully frayed around the edges. You want me to help you to save your precious home? I asked, not even bothering to hide the sarcasm. Why should I help a family who tosses me aside like yesterday's garbage? I regret it and I want to show that to you, she pleaded. I want to rebuild our relationship, to make things right between us, but right now we need the funding and you're our only hope. Every fiber of my being screamed to shut the door, to walk away from the guilt that beckoned from the other side. But something, perhaps it was a faint glimmer of hope, perhaps a need for revenge, caused me to linger. Why should I be responsible for your mess? I repeated, the rigidness creeping into my voice so heavy that it felt like I was forcefully lifting an anchor. Because you're the only one who can, she whispered, desperation threading through her voice. You are the only one who can help, and I promise I will make it right. I'll do anything you ask. The sincerity of her confession weighed down hard upon my shoulders like an anvil. For perhaps the first moment in my life, I could sense the burden she carried, twisted with regret and remorse. I stood under the dim light of my porch, releasing a shaky breath as memories played out before me, a montage of lonely nights, bitter words, and the incessant need to be seen. And what will you do when you get what you want? I asked, probing deeper, reflecting on the way they had made me feel less than human. Will you shove me back into my corner? Will I become an afterthought again? No, my mother whispered, the promise tumbling forth. I can't promise to erase the past, Aurora, but I can promise to change. You are no longer just the girl who fades into the background. You are my daughter, my firstborn. The weight of her plea hung in the air, a heavy yet fragile fraying thread between us. I found myself stepping back, the door barely ajar, exposing my heart's conflict to the frigid twilight. Here was a woman who had abandoned me, only to return bruised and broken, begging for a lifeline. Why should I believe you? I challenged, heart stumbling in the swell of rising emotions. What's stopping you from turning your back once more? What's stopping me? She hesitated before adding, the last thing I want is to lose any of you again. I can't bear to live with that, and you deserve more than I ever gave you. Her eyes hardened, showing a flicker of determination. I want to make amends, truly, but I can't do it alone. Money isn't everything, I replied, my breath a small cloud between us as I considered the truth in my words. You can't fix our relationship with money, you need to start by acknowledging how wrong you were. She nodded slowly, the glimmer of hope straining against the painful history that loomed behind us like a specter. You're right, and I will do everything I can to make that right, but please, can you help us first? We need a way to hold on to what little we have left. My heart twisted between the longing to crush her words with my own anger and the faint stir of compassion that began to unfurl inside me. There was a part of me that wanted to slam the door and retreat back into the safety of a life distance from them, yet another part yearned to break the chains of my bitterness. What if I do help? I asked finally, my resolve softened by the ache of tension enveloping us. What will you give in return? Her expression changed instantly, hope lifting her features as if a weight had been shattered. Anything, she breathed, voice steadying. Just give me a chance, please. Let me show you the mother I can be. No more hurt, only healing. As the darkness encircled us, a battle ignited within me, an indecision that swayed between forgiveness and venom. I stared into her pleading eyes, feeling the thrum of resentment alongside the stirrings of a long-buried bond. Somewhere within her despair, perhaps I could find the remnants of love, a possibility of rebuilding what was lost. Fine, I said finally, steels in my resolve. But make no mistake, this isn't a free pass. This is your chance, a single one. If you want my help, you will have to earn it. The door swung open wider, allowing the shadows to fall behind me as I prepared to step into the tangled web of our complicated history, straddling the line between vengeance and compassion. As the night pressed in around us, a whisper of a signal echoed, a turn of fate lingering like the last light of the sun, tender yet deceptive. We both had our roles to play in this narrative, and somehow I was about to discover just how deeply the ties of family could stretch, even to the point of snapping. The silence that descended between us felt thick, dense with the weight of everything left unsaid. I stood there, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within me. My heart raced as I watched my mother lower her gaze, shame flickering fleetingly across her features. She seemed so small, so fragile in that moment, a far cry from the imposing figure I remembered from my childhood, a woman whose decisions had cut deeper than any knife. I made mistakes, Aurora, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can never take back the hurt I caused you. I see that now, but I need you to understand that I was afraid. I was afraid I could lose your father if I chose you. I scoffed, the bitterness spewing from my core like a volcano ready to erupt. Afraid of losing him, afraid of my existence? I paused, the stinging sensation of betrayal clawing at my throat, the words aching to be released like trapped birds. Perhaps if you had not placed a value on my sisters over me, things would have been different. My voice trembled as the heat of hurt and rage flooded through me. The memory of years spent in shadows, fighting for attention, echoed in the depths of my mind. Every birthday spent unnoticed, every achievement overshadowed by their favor toward my sisters. Her pleas only stoked the fury I had spent years encapsulating. I could see her faltering resolve as the truth struck her like a thunderbolt. This was never just about inheritance, was it? You repaid my love with neglect. My finger pointed toward her, trembling yet unyielding. Each word I spoke seemed to chip away at the protective armor she had donned for years. The air felt electric between us, charged with the weight of my grievances. Tears brimmed in her eyes, glistening like fragile crystals, a testament to the walls she had built around her heart. I could almost hear the cracking sounds as they began to fracture under the weight of my truth. You and father chose to turn your back on me. You wanted to forget I existed. Well, now I have returned that favor. You think I am the only one who suffered because of your choices. With each release of my pent-up anguish, I felt lighter, as if strings that had tethered me to her shame were being cut one by one. My heart surged with a strange relief. There was power in acknowledging the past, in recognizing the hurt for what it was. I had trapped myself in a cage of silence for too long, too afraid to voice the truth, to touch the raw wounds at the center of our fractured relationship. There on my doorstep, I saw more than just a remorseful parent. I saw the embodiment of the betrayal I had endured every single day of my life. You pretend it was an accident, that you had no control over what happened, I spat, feeling the fire in my belly blaze higher, pushing me to confront the darkness. But it was a choice you made over and over again. Her gaze flickered up ever so slightly, just enough for me to see the shame glisten within her eyes. It was like staring into a mirror, reflecting every bruise I'd ever felt. I steeled myself against the wave of compassion that threatened to surface, reminding myself of all the nights spent in longing for her approval, a good job, or a hug that never came. Do you know how it feels to be invisible, to atone for my very existence while my sisters basked in your pride? I continued, each word like pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire. You never made me feel worthy. You never opened your heart to me. You locked it away with all the treasures of your love, tossing the key aside like I didn't matter. Her lips quivered, and I could see the flicker of regret inside her, fighting against the fortress she had built around herself. I was finally releasing the years of anguish in my heart, echoing the shadows that had loomed over me for so long. Suddenly, the pressure within me transformed into something liberating, something that felt almost magical. I realized then the burden of their neglect no longer had to be mine alone. Too many years wasted wallowing in my unresolved anger. I was finally stepping out of the suffocating darkness, determined to break free. You want to talk about fear? I exclaimed, my voice rising above the weight of our shared silence. You should have feared not having me in your life. You don't get to decide when I matter. You don't get to pick and choose which daughter to love. I stared into her eyes, searching for something, anything that might indicate she understood the enormity of her betrayal. Instead, I found only the reflection of my own pain. The vulnerability swirling through her expression turned my resolve into something more complex, a strange mix of empathy and anger. I had fought so hard to reclaim my worth, and yet seeing her sorrow made me question if I had gone far enough. You think it was just a choice between two of us? Like you were picking apples at the market? I pressed on, feeling the tremor build in my voice. The thump of my heart echoed loudly in my ears. I was the one thrown away, don't you get it? I was the one sent to the darkest corners of your heart and left to rot there. With every word, I felt the power grow within me, an incredible release. I was no longer balled up in a state of silent suffering. I was stepping fully into the light, relinquishing the need for her approval, for her love. It felt as if I had broken through a barrier that had once kept me trapped. I know what it's like to suffer, I said, not able to contain the passion that fueled me. But what have you ever done to fix the damage you caused? You thought by simply showing up today you could wipe the slate clean? I'm supposed to forgive and forget because you say you are sorry. The moment hung heavy between us, crowded with the unspoken truths of our lives. But there was still a flicker of hope in my voice. Surrender needed to be acknowledged, a first step to heal the painful rift that had stretched between us. I could see it, the anguish etched into my mother's features, mingling with my long-standing frustrations. The conversation dwindled into silence, each heartbeat echoing louder than the last one. Hesitantly, she turned away. I felt a rush of empowerment in that moment. I had nothing left to prove to her. This was the culmination of everything I had fought for all these years. Their betrayal had propelled me to discover my worth, to fight for a life that was truly mine. As she took a step back from the threshold, I looked at her with a fierce clarity. I no longer needed their acceptance. I had gone through hell and emerged from the depths of sadness. I had triumphed despite their rejection. Go, I said, my voice steady, no longer trembling. You don't get to decide how I reclaim my life. You don't get to hold power over me anymore. With every wall they had built between us, I had risen with resilience. In those final moments, I learned that the chains that bound us were only as strong as our willingness to uphold them. For the first time in my life, I felt an exhilarating sense of autonomy flood through every inch of my being. It was like shedding an old skin, leaving behind the girl who once begged for her mother's love. With a deep breath, I closed the door behind her. The click felt both exhilarating and terrifying as I stood there, alone but free. Every ounce of weight that had been placed upon me began to dissipate, leaving nothing but a trail of redemption in its wake. I had walked this path for so long, and now I was finally free from their shadows, free to be the woman I was meant to be. I leaned against the door, my heart pounding, the silence almost deafening after the storm that had just passed. Outside, the world continued, unhindered and unknowing, while I stood on the precipice of my future, a future unwritten, an inheritance of strength I could now claim for myself. My journey had been long and riddled with darkness, but I could see the light ahead, bright and tantalizing.